Freddie, fame.
Yo, I'm the lyrical swordsman, decapitating bitches with my linguistics, so vicious yet mystic. Witnesses go ballistic. My craft is worked on effectively. I'm confident when I attack, it's irreversible, like hysterectomies. Don't mess with me unless you want your life to lose value, like ancient house's equity. In my hood, pedestrians beg for food. Some of y'all thinking filet mignon, but baking soda's significant in that recipe. Pseudonymous moms and cathedrals emphasizing creeds for their sons incarcerated, trying to cop a plea, trying to maintain a balance in this reality. Who end up popping guns like 60 progressing teens. Gangsters in the streets remind me of Bob Marley, but not only are they shooting sheriffs, but also deputies. I'm not a participator, just a narrator, looking for greater potency and X amount of ganja weed.
We here to bring money and to bring change. They here to cause confusion. If this was chess, we'd be yelling checkmate 3 years ago, because we've been beat these. It's not a game.
Right again, shalom and salam talk, greetings. It's Lidj Yefdi, Yefdeyah, Yohannes, Wolde, Amanuel, RasTafariRedemption.com. And in continuation with our Learn Amharic series, going mostly through these, again, coined by illustrious scholars of many Ivy League schools, international, prestigious higher institutions of learning, the Afro-Shemitic languages. And really more so, I sought to put together these 3 languages and in a construction with the naming process, as I know for certain that many of our immediate circle amongst many of those who tune into Discipleship Radio. They're on our blogtalkradio.com. Also, many of our Rastafari and our Ethiopian Hebrews, Hebrew-minded like peoples, of course, and those of the sort tend to look toward these lessons to reconstruct most of not only the history, the heritage, learn the language, of course, by rote, and also to study what literature is, available and accessible at this point, but more so just to become fluent in more languages, especially those of anciency. So keeping that in mind, we're here at another site, and we'll have a bunch more sites here as we move on from the Arabic and the naming system there, and we'll see the similarities, of course, here throughout the Hebrew version, as we're going through this on the second portion. And then the third portion, of course, will move on to the Ge'ez, Tigrinya, and Amharic, and more Ethiopic languages. And you'll see a stream of more so the structures of the naming systems, and see how they're, very intricately intertwined. So coming from this article, and this is from Judaism.about.com. So more so the about religion section here in this post written by one Lisa Katz. Here a Judaism expert here for this site, of course, and kind of going through much of the history of the naming system for many Jewish people, and how they utilize much of the ancient Hebrew, especially from the Masoretic texts, and what they would call Tiberian-Hebrew. And it's a very interesting vantage point and a critical time length and timeline of study for, ones of our, of course, affinity. So again, starting off just with the proverb from many of the European Jewish circles, it leaves a quote here, an end quote, "With each child, the world begins anew." So we continue here. And remembering, of course, that most of the information that ones, of course, will be able to search out and will be the most accessible at this point would more than likely be of the affinity of the relation and correlation of many of the European Jews. So you'll see mostly a lot of the literature now, as we're still in the works, and many ones of the sort, not only from our own circles, but other circles as well there in scholastic fields and archaeology, so on and so forth, putting forth their findings as well. But mostly the literature that will be most accessible will come from Russia, Poland, Lithuania, Germany, so on and so forth there of more than likely Eastern Europe and Eurasia. So, of course, we continue to put these things forward for ones to, really search out for themselves and really gain a bit more grounds on this. And again, now keeping in mind that the Hebrew in which is spoken today, of course, stems from the biblical Hebrew. And the biblical Hebrew, of course, also stems from what they would call or coin Paleo-Hebrew, or the Proto-Canaanite or Canaanite-Hebrew. And from there, of course, we also have the Aramaic, which also plays a huge part in the whole construction of what they know today as Hebrew. So again, just referencing that so ones don't get confused and they kind of have a vantage point, once they really start to do their research, especially after the post and the conclusion of this video. These are some, subtle clip notes, just to keep in mind for ones to really understand and, have that as an arsenal as they're going through these renditions and, most of the studies which they'll find out here today. So interesting point here coming from this one, Lisa Katz. She has the subscript here in the article. Biblical names. The majority of the names in the Bible originate from the Hebrew language. Over half of the 2,800 names in the Bible are original personal names. For example, there is only one Abraham in the Bible. Only about 5% of the names found in the Bible are used today. Now, again, ones, of course, will reference the Arabic naming system and the Arabic naming process that mostly came from a lot of the links from the beginning of this series of posts, especially the Arabic naming system. And of course, we'll have that reference here in the description box for ones to again reference and kind of, lean in and check from time to time just to cross-reference. It's a very similar fashion from the Arabic to the Hebrew, and also will lead more to the Ethiopic, especially those of the Hebraic persuasion in that sense, or the Shemitic or Afro-Shemitic persuasion. So you'll see a stream there just to have for ones to kind of reference. And also within that naming practice, it usually falls into 7 general categories. And just to review those again, we have the 1 Isim, 2 the Kunya, 3 the Nasab, 4 the Lakab, 5 the naming of harmless signification, or more so just a the generalization, more so of a nickname that kind of references one's attribute, and also 6 the occupational hisba, and 7 the geographical hisba. So more so showing one's origin, or usually where a person is born, or where they have lived, or where they have made a significant impact geographically to a certain place. Now here in this write-up, of course, by Lisa Katz on the Hebrew, we find a similar pattern as well in the Hebrew. There, and this comes from the reference of the literary work These Are the Names by one Alfred Kolach or Kolach. So ones will be able to search that out, and we'll of course have the links for that as well in the description box. This also categorizes many of the biblical or the Hebrew names into 7 categories in a similar fashion. Now, as I've searched out mostly, and this is more so work that a personal work I've been doing for myself, as well as one I will share, momentarily and very soon, as I'm continuing to gather most of the information, seeing that these Afro-Shemitic languages have various and numerous similarities. The Hebrew, according to Alfred Kolach, in this literary work of These Are the Names, also categorizes these 7 categories in a similar fashion, and where he names them 1, names describing the characteristics of a person; 2, names influenced by the experiences of the parents; 3, names of animals; 4, names of plants or flowers; 5, theophoric names with God's name either as a prefix or suffix; 6, conditions or experiences of mankind or the nation; 7, names which express hope for the future or desired condition. So again, these 7 categorizations of names and the naming system really stem again and branch toward the same as the Arabic in a similar fashion. And again, leaving that to classify both languages in the Afro-Shemitic or the Shemitic. And again, we just show that stream to, of course, have a reference point and a vantage point that they can, start to gain and grasp a lot of what we put forward, especially from the initial point here. Now, again, just to show again the reference, and this is more so coming from my own personal work. Again, we remember the isim in the Arabic language as the given or personal name. And showing in that we have Shem, the Shem or Hashem in the Hebrew. And the Shem also refers to a given or personal name. And examples, of course, would be like the name Abraham, or Yehuda, or Yisahak, Yaakov, and these are references to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Judah, so on and so forth. These are names which ones would hear almost on a regular basis, and are just translating them roughly to the English. Usually has its toll and shows a lot of toil involved, as the Hebrew, of course, doesn't have a J sound specifically, so it really becomes a matter of intricate and very tedious work to translate most of the Hebrew, as the Arabic has certain sounds and phonetics that bring out a sound that would produce sounds very close to a J or a J specifically, or the sound that is produced as a J from the English. But the Hebrew, of course, does not, and usually is given the, I guess you can say, correlation to a J sound, and mostly those sounds come from the Yod, the letter Yod in the Hebrew alphabet. So interesting point in that the isim, has its relation to the Shem in Hebrew. So again, moving on, we move on to the second point, in which, as I mentioned, from the Arabic, we'll only go through 3 of these specific. And here we have the kunya, of course, from the Arabic, which is more so an honorific name or descriptive nickname, and again referencing that to the kanui or kanoi there, and then also showing an honorific name, a descriptive name, in a similar fashion to the kunya. And of course, names of this effect usually come out as for one instance, a rabbi, a Rebbe Joseph or Rebbe Yosef, a Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Akiba. These are names that are honorific towards certain ones, and usually given from another person to a specific person, to show that honor and reverence. Usually, so it's just wants to put that into perspective from the Hebrew, of course, language, and kind of show the, not only the similarities between the Hebrew and the Arabic, but to also show the correlation and how it fits culturally into the language. Now, interesting enough, as the work is very tedious, as I mentioned here on the beginning of the podcast, once we come to what we know as the nasab, or the inheritance, or the lineage, the pedigree, or the heritage name, the nasab from the Arabic usually stems from names and example as ibn. So usually you have your given name, and usually what would be in place, I would say, as the last name would be ibn and the father's name. So I mentioned before that, mostly in the Arabic, most of the names are more so patronymic. And of course, we'll, again, have a description of that and a definition for ones to actually get into that a little deeper. In the Arabic, that stems more so towards the father's name. But we have to remember, again, that most of the mothers of these children, or the mothers of these people, usually give the names to the children when they're born or when they're very young. So it's not so much that the things of patriarchal, or what ones would coin as patriarchal methods, are just so coercive and more so under duress. But many of the women of these cultures, many of the women of these specific geographical locations and tribal or village or city, even so, state places, usually coalesce and also, accept these modes of culture to, their specific mode of living or their way of life. So we have to take that into consideration. So, but again, in continuation, here with the nasab, we have a relation in the Hebrew to the nachala. Nachala, also showing an inheritance or a lineage, a pedigree. And but here in the Hebrew, we also find not only patronymic names, but matronymic names showing heritage as well. So with the Hebrew, whereas one's name in the Arabic would be blank, or or more so whatever the given name, the first name in place of the first name, as the English would be the first name heard, especially for a daughter, you would hear bint, meaning the daughter of, and the father's name or the grandfather's name. Now, as we continue in these studies, we'll, of course, use these levels here, or the stemming from language to language, as building blocks for ones to really gain a holistic perspective on the entireties of languages, or these languages specifically, so that way ones, of course, when they come to these names and really seek to translate them, especially to the Ethiopic, because that's really more so the goal of my own specific circle. This will, really give them grounds and a good foundation to stand on to really show these languages in perspective, that they can translate them effectively. So now, again, to put this as a complete package for ones in the Hebrew and correlating that to the first study of the Arabic naming system, an example of a full name for one, of course, who is of a Hebrew affinity or Hebrew stock, we would have my own name. We'll take that and translating that, of course, to the Hebrew, it would be more so Yohannes ben Amanuel. So Yohannes, of course, being my isim, or my given name, and a Kanui would be more so a nickname. So this doesn't show in my full name, but more so the given name, and we move directly to the nasab or the nachala, my patronymic or matronymic heritage, inheritance, or lineage name. And it shows Bain Amanuel. So just a rough translation would be Yohannes, the son of Amanuel, or to the English, John, the son of Emmanuel. So leaving that in perspective for a daughter, of course, the Bain would be replaced with Bait or Bait, Bayit, and more so showing that even so from the Hebrew, a Bait would be a house, or more so a lineage, or in a synonymic form, or synonymously, the tribal affiliation, or the lineage, the pedigree, the inheritance of. And with that, many ones of the females there who, of course, speak Hebrew would also use their mother's names or their father's names. It could be an either or once we kind of get to the Hebrew, whereas in the Arabic, more so the patrilineal names would be used there for the final name. So putting that in perspective for once, and just to have that again for a reference study, we'll of course move on to our Ethiopic languages, where once we'll really see the entirety of the whole study here. And what I'm presenting this for is mostly those of our immediate circle, so they can really gain a full perspective, and not only just have these names in place, but fully understand them from a stronger perspective, and be able to communicate more effectively, not only in the languages, but to really understand them holistically.